Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're aiming to help business owners, business leaders and fellow coaches by sharing our experience and the experience of our guests who've coached people all around the world in all of different sectors and industries that you can imagine. So very little more to say other than do please now sit back, relax and enjoy this edition, and look out for a special offer for our loyal audience at the end of the programme. And welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. And I'm pleased to say it's my privilege to be joined today by Josh Keegan, who is an entrepreneur, an author, an accountant, and I guess a whole bunch of other things besides. And today we're going to bust the myth about how bigger is better when it comes to SMEs and how they can outperform on every statistic the larger organisations. So, Josh, welcome to the Coaching Conversation. And before we go much further, please let us audience know exactly who you are and why you are doing what you're doing now.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I guess you summed up who I am. So my name is Joshua Keegan. I've been an entrepreneur now for around almost 10 years. I started when I was 24 and now I'm 34. So it's been a 10-year journey. And what do we actually do now? Well, we essentially have a company called Ultimate FD, and we specialize in giving entrepreneurs the tools they need to run a successful, highly profitable, lucrative business through finance, because finance is one of those things which most entrepreneurs can never quite get their heads around. And it's incredible how many entrepreneurs are building businesses that fundamentally don't actually make any money. You know, they're able to put food in the fridge, but they never actually create those lucrative businesses. And that's what we essentially do. So it's actually giving entrepreneurs in a language they understand the financial tools to help them run their business.
And so for you, what would be a typical client? Is it an SME? Is it a startup? What would it typically be?
Yeah, we work with anyone. The solution and systems we put in place, we've done this for our clients who are as small as £50,000 a year up to about 5 million so far. So the revenue is kind of like it's a bit of an indicator, but I'd say typically we do work with small companies, and we're going to talk about what small means shortly. But to me, that means an entrepreneur with a team of around 8 to 10 people who's hit that kind of is heading towards that 7-figure revenue or is around that kind of lower multiples of 7-figure revenue as a business.
And so when you're dealing with them, are you introduced to the owner or through the accountancy firm they use, or how do you who's your person in that client, and how do you come across them?
It's normally the entrepreneur. So normally the entrepreneur is frustrated because for the last at some point, I believe that every entrepreneur realizes you need to worry about the money and you need to start thinking about the numbers. But you either do that proactively, which most entrepreneurs I don't think they particularly do, or you do it reactively. And you have that day, I've been there once or twice, where you're about to lose everything. You're about to lose the business because you've messed up. You've not forecasted your cash. You've run out of money. You've spent your client's money. You've not accrued for your VAT, that the bill needs to be paid tomorrow. And when entrepreneurs have that shock, they realize that they need to start taking their finances seriously. So what they then try and do is they then try and bring somebody in to actually start managing their finances for them. And the whole world of finance and accounting is an absolute nightmare. Like, you can go and pay your accountant to do this for you, and they'll give you what's called data, not information. You know, they'll give you a P&L, they'll give you a balance sheet, they'll give you a cash flow forecast, but they don't actually give you budget to actuals. They don't give you commentary, and they don't give you the story that you need for your business. You can find a bookkeeper, and we can talk about this, but bookkeepers tend to be underqualified for what most entrepreneurs actually need, and people don't realize they need a finance manager. And I was actually myself in this boat. So if we cast back to why I do this, my first business was a lettings business. I kind of fell into it. It's a long story, but I was working as an accountant. I got my chartership, finished my qualification, and then I started with my, unfortunately now late business partner. And he knew it had all the knowledge, and he got very, very sick. And we found out he had a tumor in his spine. So at the age of 24, I was thrust into the scenario where I had to work out how to do all this business stuff, how I had to recruit, how I had to scale, how I had to sell, and all this stuff, which I had no experience doing. I was just an accountant, just a few months prior. But I was scaling the company, and we were doing relatively well. But then we started to run out of money, and I literally remember I've got my accountancy background as well. So I spent about 18 months. I think I spent around £60,000 on FDs that would tell me why we've run out of money. Tax accountants who were going to tell me why we've run out of money. Bookkeepers that said, promise me the world. And none of them could actually give me the answer. None of them, they could move the ball forward and do a bit of work, but none of them could tell me, like, why did we run out of money? How badly have we run out of money? What was this black hole? How are we going to get out of this black hole? And no one could tell me. About 18 months after spending about £60,000, I cracked a solution, because I was just working on this constantly. How do we actually get this solution? What is the better way? And I eventually found the solution that we now put in place for clients, which as soon as we got that, we got financial clarity. As soon as we had clarity, we knew what we needed to do. As soon as we knew what we needed to do, we could sort the black hole. And then what I also found is this clarity actually told me how to run a highly lucrative, highly profitable business. So I used this newfound clarity to focus fully on profit, the margin, the bottom line. And I was never going to go back to where we were. And I used that to scale the company to a really lucrative position over the next kind of 2 years. And then we exited that at the end of 2021 at a very, very high multiple as a result. So where people come to me is when they're typically in that zone where I was in, where they've tried to do this, they've kind of got themselves into a pickle. They know they need the answer. They know they should have these numbers. They know they should know what their margin is and what their balance. They should have a clean balance sheet. They know they should have a cash flow forecast. They may be reviewing the numbers, but they know that they're not quite right. And they're just a bit frustrated because they now know this is the thing they need to drive them forward.
Okay. Just looking at the story of your lettings business and how you scaled it and did what you did with it. What is the myth of bigger is better and in relation to SMEs? What do you see and what do you feel around that myth?
I'm very fortunate now in that through having Ultimate FD, I've got access to hundreds and hundreds of zero accounts. So I've seen behind the scenes now of like literally hundreds of different businesses. And I've seen behind the scenes the ones that do really well and the ones that don't necessarily do too well. And the realization I've had with my first company and then seeing behind the scenes more and more and more is there's just a lot of broke entrepreneurs out there. A lot of broke entrepreneurs that literally, they might make enough cash to, as I said, put food in the fridge or, survive, but they're living hand to mouth. They're living, month to month. And in reality, they're not scaling these lucrative companies that actually have an exit value that actually pay them what they actually want. And it's this constant battle and struggle. What was a keen observation for me, though, is that the companies making significant chunks of money are not always the ones that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think one of the problems with entrepreneurship is growth is sexy. Like most podcasts are about 10xing or grow, grow, grow. And everyone talks about the top line, which is like this revenue number. It's like grow, 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 get bigger, bigger, bigger. I've doubled in size this year. I've grown by 20%. I've whatever. But no one actually talks about the bottom line and what's actually happened to your bottom line profit. And what I realized was the reason they're not talking about the bottom line is because a lot of these high growth entrepreneurs don't actually know what that number is. They're not actually quite sure. And generally, it's not what people actually want to see. Like if you actually start looking at the bottom line, there's normally some significant problems. And as I started working with more and more clients, what we started to see is the companies that do really well are what I would call small businesses. Now, when I say small, it doesn't necessarily mean turnover. When I'd put a business which has got, up to about £5 million in this kind of small business category for turnover. But what they tend to have is they have a relatively small team, anywhere from 8 to 12 people, absolute max. They leverage international labor markets. They leverage contractors all over the world to deliver a lot of their work for them rather than bringing everything in-house. Like they have we have all our bookkeepers and finance managers in South Africa. They have a designer that lives in the Philippines. They have, whoever those people may be all over the world. And they don't keep focusing on growth. They get to what we call a sweet spot where the business actually works well. And rather than continue to grow and grow and grow, rather than introduce to continue to grow their core product, they introduce subsequent products and subsequent margin plays. And so what they do is rather than growing and actually get to a place where they double in size and make the same amount of profit, they actually stay at a single size and they achieve more margins, more money, because they're not always focused on growth, because growth is expensive and actually decreases margins rather than actually boosting them. So I would encourage everyone to listen to this to understand that your business is going to work well at certain sweet spots. And you need to work out what that sweet spot is. And once you get there, you need to like squash your ego, stop trying to grow, and start focusing on the top line and start focusing on the bottom line. And once you do this for a few months, a couple of years, that's where you see the magic happen. And that's where you create this really highly lucrative business by increasing your prices, introducing different product streams, arranging commissions and kickbacks, solving more of your current clients' problems, as opposed to trying to find more and more clients. So that's this kind of small business methodology, is that we're not always trying to grow. We're trying to find a sweet spot that works well for us. We keep our business small, as in the number of clients, meaning we have small business problems, not big business problems. And in reality, most entrepreneurs don't actually want to go the distance. People think they do, but when you start having to, when all your day is now caught up in HR issues and legal disputes and these big business issues the whole time, it's actually the opposite of what we wanted when we came into entrepreneurship. And at these smaller levels, you can create super amounts of leverage. So when I had my letting agency, I was working on 90 minutes a week. That was 90 minutes a week was all that was required from me. I was making loads and loads of money. It was brilliant. I wasn't trying to grow the business. I was just actually squeezing the pips out of everything that we had. And my team was 8 people strong. It was easy to manage. I had a general manager in there and it was like easy. Whereas I've seen people go miles and miles bigger and all of a sudden they're making less money. They've got loads more noise. They are exhausted. They're flat out. The team's falling apart and they're actually making less money. They've got less to show for it. And so that's the kind of small business ethos that we talk about.
It's really interesting, this, because what you're describing is the ultimate in common sense, really. Whereas we're all very often, as entrepreneurs or even business leaders generally, whether in employed positions or not, to chase the top line. And I know there's all the sayings about profit is sanity, turnover is not. And it's about, how do you break out of this feeling that you must grow for safety's sake? You've got to add another client. You've got to get a new product line. You've got to keep growing, because anything else other than growth is going backwards. How do you change the psyche of the entrepreneur to actually embrace what you've just said without thinking they're either a failure or putting themselves at risk?
Yeah, so the secret to this is what we call a business model. And in reality, you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. You wouldn't go, right, I'm going to build that house and I'm just going to start. You would go, right, well, let's get some architectural plans drawn up. Let's get some quotes drawn up to know how much it's actually going to cost us. Let's design what the house is going to look like. And once you've nailed that, then you go, cool. You start laying bricks, you start the foundations, you get started. And the difference between a highly profitable business and a non-profitable one is what we call a business model. And this is basically the blueprint to your business. How does your business fundamentally actually make money? So what we need to do is there's 5 rules, there's 5 parts of a business model, and you need to get these absolutely nailed. Those rules, those parts, the first is your price. So what you're going to charge your clients, which is obvious, but at the same time, this becomes your minimum price and you don't drop below it. And too many people are dropping below this to make sales, but actually it cripples the business model and it's unprofitable. So the first is your price. The second is your gross margin. So your gross margin being the profitability of your product. And if you're like me, I've got a service-based business, that'll be my price less than my team to deliver that. I've got consultants that deliver that work. So that'll be your gross margin. And generally, to make your business profitable, it depends what your business is. We generally, for a service-based business, you'd want that gross margin to be at 60 to 70% in general, is what I've seen. So it needs to be nice and high. Then you're going to have your overheads. So how much can you actually spend to run the business? So maybe you've got an office, maybe you've got 5 team members. How much does your accountant cost? What actually goes in there? Then you can have a target net margin. So what does your target net margin to be? And I'd always really encourage people to aim for a service-based trading business. Anywhere from 30 to 40% is like lucrative. I work with a lot of I'm a property investor myself, so a lot of property clients. If it's like an asset-backed kind of property business, anywhere from 8 to 12% is it's generally quite a good place to be. So you want to set like a target margin in there. And then the 5th is how big are you actually going to go? And you can actually go to my website, download a template to do this. We can share some links in the comments. But what this does is it actually allows you to determine how your business fundamentally is going to work. And you can plug in your minimum price. Right, I'm going to aim for a 65% cost of goods sold, or you can enter your cost of goods, and you see about 65%. I'm going to go for a target margin of 30%. I'm going to get 100 clients, and in doing that, my overheads can be, say, £10,000 a month. You go, well, how does that actually look? You go, right, well, if I do all that and sell at that level, charge that price, keep my overheads at that level, I can see I'm going to make £6,000 a month with this company, as an example. And you go, well, to live and for my family to have what I want, I need more than that. I need £10,000 a month. So you go back to the business model, right? How do we actually make that work then? Okay, we need to increase our prices. We need to get slightly bigger. We need to reduce our overheads. We need to have a higher target net margin. And then we get back. Cool. So the model's kicking up £10,000 a month at the bottom. Brilliant. Obviously, we need to factor in things like tax, etc. But I'm just trying to keep the example nice and simple. And this whole process, I got it building it backwards. So for me, the business is just a vehicle. And the vehicle for me is like where I'm actually trying to get to. All I've ever really been trying to do is create financial security and stability for my family. I mean, that's now, a few years ago, it was all about money, and you're going to go on different levels of your journey. But now for me, stability for my family is the most important. So what we do is we go, well, what do we actually want to achieve that? So for me, achieving that for me was £6,747. I knew that I needed £6,747 a month. So my first business, I just built it to make sure I could achieve more. Like, so the starting point was getting to that point. We did that for a year. We hit that point. I was like, okay, what's next? Cool. Then it was a more considered growth to take it higher, because I wanted to make sure that we could always get paid that, no matter the ups and downs in the business. So that's how your business model works. It's like actually designing what you want and then building a business around that, as opposed to what most entrepreneurs do, is that we turn up, they just make some sales, they recruit team members, and they just hope that it's going to kind of work its way out. And that's this ethos. So in answer to your question, how do you stop this bigger is always better? It's just actually deciding how big you're going to go, get to that point first. And once you've got to that point, then you can reassess. And there are some entrepreneurs out there that do just love the game, like do just love playing and love growing and growing and growing. But I'd say that's a very small percentage. And if you really do, or if you really are in that boat where you just want to keep going and going and going, you've probably got some sort of damage or something you're dealing with where it's never going to be enough. And that's absolutely fine. But the majority of people I speak to, they just want to create a business that's going to give them and their families the lifestyle they want. So don't grow a business bigger than that, because although you might have more money, you're going to have way more problems and way more challenges. So that's the ethos: is build the business model, work out what that looks like, and grow into that business model. Stop when you get there, reassess, and then take it to the next steps, the next level.
So when you're speaking to a prospective or a new client, and you're talking about these 5 pillars and the business model itself, do you get a universal light bulb moment with the clients, or do you get different personalities reacting differently? How does that tend to go, that conversation?
That's a really good question. If I think about my ideal clients, I think my ideal clients just get it. They're kind of in a place where you kind of explain, well, let's build your business model. How is your business going to make work? How is it going to work? And how is it going to give you the money they want? You kind of build it out, say, right, well, if we're making 100 grand a month, would you be happy? They go, yeah, absolutely. That's more than I need. We work through the mechanics, and the response is pretty much, that sounds perfect, because there's a level of maturity there. My ideal client is not someone that's probably just started, because I think when you just start, you might be in the same, Graham. I certainly was. You've just got these crazy ambitions. Like before you have that family, before you think you want a yacht, you think you want, man, you think you want all this stuff, and maybe you do, but over time, when you start getting some of these things, you realize you buy it, and it's like, oh, right, that meant nothing. So then over time, you find these bigger meanings, and you become a bit more purposeful. I say the ideal client, they kind of know that all I'm telling them is correct, but they've just always struggled to have the tools in place to actually work it out and put it in place, because they're entrepreneurs, they're not accountants, and they are accountants, are accountants, not entrepreneurs. So it's quite it's hard to find that balance of that person in between.
Do you find that clients, as you begin to engage with them, do they really understand how their business makes money? Other than driving sales and employing people and doing stuff, do they really understand the mathematical connection between activity and cost or income? Do you think they've got that?
So we're literally, this morning I was writing some marketing copy. We're going to launch a campaign next month. And like the tagline for the first webinar we're going to do is literally, are you a 7-figure entrepreneur who's making profit but doesn't really know where all the money goes? And like, I think that's probably the scenario. And they know they're making profit, the business is doing well, but they're also, it's quite volatile, and they probably just don't have the confidence in it, and they're quite nervous about it. And for example, they get the tax bill comes in, it's bigger than they were expecting it was going to be. The cash can be a bit all over the place. They can overdraw from the company because they think they're okay and then have to put more money back in. And I'd say I very rarely meet an entrepreneur that has an accurate balance sheet. And a balance sheet is well, if your balance sheet's not accurate, your accounts can't be accurate. You're an accountant. Like, if your balance sheet's not accurate, that means something's wrong. Your P&L's got to be wrong, because if your balance sheet's not correct, your P&L's got to be incorrect, which means you can't have good numbers there. If you don't have an accurate balance sheet, there's no way you can forecast your cash correctly. Because if you don't have accurate AP, AR, and all those different elements, you can't forecast your cash correctly. So it's very rare you meet someone that actually knows their numbers and actually has all this in place. And I think what most entrepreneurs, the ones that are doing well, they're doing well financially, but they do crave this understanding because there's a fear factor. When we start out, we're worried about how we're going to make money. We actually realize making money is not the hard part. When you get to a certain point, it's like, how are you going to keep that money you've made? And how do I not lose this? Because I've created this business, and how do I keep it? So that's a big part. The second part is there's a lot of margins that most people are missing. And generally, if you want to create a lucrative business, it's about looking inwards what you already have, because you've already got lots of clients, you've already got people you've sold to. So then how do you create a more lucrative business? We then resell stuff to them. And normally as entrepreneurs, we only solve like the first problem that the client comes to us for. It's like, well, that's the first problem. But imagine if once we solve that problem, they've got another problem, we solve that, and then we solve the next one, and then we solve the next one. And generally, a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't kind of realize that. So once you start to see the mechanics, you can start to see all these extra things they could be selling, and that's where the money's made, like in those extra additionals. And most entrepreneurs, I'd say, aren't really aware of that and aren't really clear on the fact that actually it's not about growing the core product, it's about starting to sell these supplementary additional products to create the margin at the bottom line.
I can echo that. I see in a lot of businesses, the entrepreneurs think the answer to any financial problem is sell more clients. And client acquisition is amazingly expensive.
Yeah, hard work.
The easiest sellers to an existing client, the most profitable sellers an existing client. So when you're working with your clients, how long typically do you work with them?
Typically, it depends. We basically have three products, which have all kind of come around with stuff that I needed. The first is called Fast Track Financials, and that's basically where we create what's called a world-class finance function. So that's for an entrepreneur. You've scaled, you maybe got a bookkeeper in-house, or you maybe got your tax accountants doing your accounts for you, but they're not really giving you information. You don't really understand it. You kind of have your finance review, and it kind of makes sense in that time, and you leave it going, I don't really understand what we were talking about. Why are we talking about amortization and depreciation and all these things that don't actually matter, particularly as an entrepreneur? So what we do is we systemize, we set up a team from South Africa to do the bookkeeping and finance management. And then we set them up with management accounts and set them on their way. And that's normally about a 3-month process, I'd say. Then we do the forecasting, which is, 4 to 6 weeks, and to actually forecast, like, where they're going. And then sometimes we have an ongoing relationship for years with people that really value the FD support to oversee everything. And the way I see that is we basically become the client. So rather than you as an entrepreneur having to be like the FD for your different finance elements, we become you. We FD, but with the financial knowledge, we oversee it. And then you just have to speak to us if you want something, or you want to know something, or you want to work something out. And then we like manage your team. So generally the relationships do go on for a good few years, but it depends what people want and the solution that people are after.
So given the new life that you're in after all the other things that you've been doing, what gives you the biggest kick? What do you really love to see happen with your clients?
I get asked why I do this all the time, because I've actually achieved what I call financial independence, because I have a portfolio on of properties on very low risk tenancies. And I don't actually need to work, which is a very fortunate place to be in. So it's like, well, why do this and why push this forward? I remember how anxious, how nervous, and how terrible I felt in that first business, where we realized there was a big financial hole and I didn't know why. and I realized that I'd caused this thing. This is my fault. I had at the time, I had a big, or I had a growing social media presence. Probably wasn't as big as I thought it was, but I was growing social media. And like people on the outside, we looked very successful. And I remember when this was all going on, I thought I was going to lose everything, thinking how embarrassed I was going to be and how I failed and how, I'd wake up in cold. I'd literally wake up sweating in the night because for anyone that's had one of these financial issues, and most people SMEs have in their career once or twice had one of these big financial stresses, it's never just that, because when this financial issue comes around, there's about 6 or 7 other things that tend to kind of kick off at the same time. 2 clients get annoyed because you've messed up, 2 team members leave, you get some sort of legal dispute or something. It all kicks off at the same time, and it's really difficult, really challenging. I was in that boat. So I remember the negativity of that feeling. And it's like, if we can avoid people walking into that makes me feel good, because, it's a way of stopping people having to go. Because I totally get it. If anyone's listening to this and they've got, like, biggest things, cash flow issues. If you've got cash flow issues in your business and you're worried about how you're going to pay your team, and like you're looking at the bank balance that's dwindling, like, I know that feeling. It is horrendous and it's not a nice feeling. So if we can help avoid that, that's brilliant. So that's like the negative element that we're trying to avoid people. But then on the flip side, I also knew what it was like to then, probably about 2.5 years later, to have turned this thing around and have this business, which was just awesome, kicking out, it was taking me 90 minutes a week and kicking me out tens of thousands of pounds of profit a month. And I was like, this is amazing. And some of my friends and some of my clients have achieved this. And it's like a pinch me moment. Like, you can't quite believe it. And I truly believe that whole thing comes from finance. It all comes from the numbers. If you know your numbers, that's how you create that, because you understand how you can pay team members, and that actually paying team members isn't going to cost you a fortune, and it's still going to result in margin. You understand how to keep your business small enough so it doesn't ever require back, big issues back in from you. You're just juicing all the money from all the clients you've already got and offering them subsequent services. I understand that a way to do that is just not to be constantly growing and growing and growing, because growth breaks things. And it means if you want to constantly grow, you'll never get to this place where you can just take your foot off and relax. And when I talk about those 90 minutes a week, that was basically 3 one-to-ones. So I'd meet with my 3 team members on a Monday for 30 minutes each, and that'll be me done for the week. And sometimes there was business development, like high value work, but I enjoy doing that. But generally, that's all I had to do. So I think there's the helping people avoid that pain that I went through, but then also getting people to enjoy that pleasure that I also experienced, which was like, and both of those things are, in my opinion, all driven by financial clarity, modeling. It's all just, the backbone is finance. And if you don't have a grip on your numbers, I don't think you can achieve either of those things particularly well.
Any business leader, any entrepreneur in the audience today will definitely relate to the cold sweats, the where the blooming X all the money gone, all of that stuff. Everybody who's really run a business and started a business will have been through that to one degree or another, unless they've been very, very, very fortunate.
I don't think they're doing it properly if they've not gone through it.
They're probably leaving it at losing.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you very, very much for your time. If any of the audience want to know more about the 5 pillars of the business model, or just to talk with you generally, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on any socials. So Facebook, Josh Keegan, or you can go on Instagram, _ultimate_FD, or you can go on LinkedIn, just Josh Keegan again. But if anyone wants to get a free copy of my book, Small Business, Big Profit, to learn a little bit more about what we do and like learn how what we've put in place could really change things to you, you can go to ultimatefd.co.uk/small-business-big-profit. I'm sure Graham wouldn't mind putting that in the show notes. You can literally download the ebook for free. So if you want a copy of that, feel free to go and enjoy.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Josh. Really, really appreciate that. So on behalf of the audience, thanks, Josh, and look forward to seeing everybody next time. Thanks again. Bye. So there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I hope it did what it set out to do. As promised at the beginning of the programme, here is a special offer for you, our loyal audience. If you reach out to me at gwiley@saydream.com and mention this podcast, we'll make available to you a coaching program for you and or your team at a 50% discount. So where can you reach us? So it's definitely gwiley@sagegreen.com. You can also reach us at the Executive Mindset at sagegreen.com, and our website is clearly theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you enjoyed this, do please leave us with a wonderful rating on Google. We'd really appreciate that. So nothing more for me to say now other than see you again soon.